Why would she choose that night, with my mother laughing downstairs over burnt peach cobbler and the hallway bulb stuttering like a bad conscience, to slide a pair of beige pantyhose under my bedroom door? I saw them first as a pale ribbon creeping across the wood floor, then as a whole shape, folded into itself, delicate and stubborn, with the pharmacy receipt still looped around one ankle like a paper tag on a bird. My room smelled like dust, detergent, and the metallic steam from the old radiator. Outside, a dog barked twice and quit. Inside, I stood barefoot on cold pine boards, one hand still on my math book, while her knuckles tapped lightly against the frame. Not a normal knock. A secret knock. Then her voice came through the crack, soft enough to make me lean toward it and hate that I was leaning. Just try. I could hear the silver lighter in her other hand clicking open, shut, open, shut. Downstairs, my stepfather said, as he always did when something went crooked, "We'll sort it." To understand why that whisper split my life so neatly, you have to see the house we were trying to make into a family. Before Mara moved in, my life had been the kind that made no noise unless you were close enough to hear the hum under it. We lived in a river town where people still said they were going into town, even if they'd never left it, where the water tower had our high school mascot painted on the side, and every other truck had a ladder rattling in the back. My mother, Denise, ran an alterations counter in the front of a dry cleaner called Harlan's, though Harlan himself had retired and spent most of his time fishing or telling people he was about to sell the place when everyone knew he wouldn't. Mom hemmed bridesmaids' dresses, patchwork jeans, replaced zippers, rescued from disasters, and made a living off the simple fact that people wanted a better fit but almost never bought it that way. I spent my afternoons there after school, steaming collars, sweeping thread clippings, sorting buttons into cloudy plastic jars whose labels had long ago peeled off. I liked the order of it. I liked that a thing could arrive twisted, torn, or too tight, and leave quieter. I liked the smell of hot cotton and starch. I liked the hiss the iron made when it kissed damp fabric, like the machine itself was calming down. There are worse ways for a boy to grow up than in a room full of things that can be mended. My mother was loving in the practical, slightly frantic way of people who had once been left with too little and decided that would never happen again on their watch. She wore her glasses on the end of her nose and a red tomato pincushion around her wrist, like jewelry. She sang along to old songs with the wrong words and absolute confidence. Her favorite line, used on me whenever I stomped around the house in silence, was, "Use your words, not your weather." She said it while stirring spaghetti sauce, while pinning hems, while scraping frost off the windshield with a store loyalty card. It should have annoyed me more than it did. The truth was, I liked that she believed words could fix a thing if you used the right ones. My stepfather, Vic, came into our life 2 years after my parents' divorce paperwork finally stopped arriving in manila envelopes. He delivered fuel and repaired whatever broke for people who never quite learned his actual job title. He was broad-shouldered, careful with his hands, and kept loose screws, nails, washers, and hex keys in empty mint tins that clicked when he shook them. He almost never raised his voice. His flaw was avoidance dressed up as patience. If tension entered a room, he treated it like a fuse he might set off by touching. "We'll sort it," he'd say, as if time were a workbench and every problem could wait there until morning. Still, he came to my middle school band concert even though I played 3 wrong notes in the first song, and when my bike chain snapped on Maple Street one August afternoon, he fixed it in the driveway without turning it into a lecture about maintenance. He became part of the house in the way useful, quiet things do. Then he married my mother, and Mara arrived with 2 duffel bags, a crate of books, a Polaroid camera held together with black tape, and a silver lighter she clicked open and shut whenever she was thinking. She didn't smoke. She said she liked the sound because it made people nervous enough to stop lying. That was Mara. She was 1 year older than me, sharp in ways that made dull people feel insulted, funny in a way that could save a dinner or ruin it, depending on how the knife turned. She painted her nails dark red, forgot to eat when she was upset, and called every object in the world by more interesting names than it had earned. The sewing machine pedal was the panic foot. Safety pins were tiny betrayals. The rolling rack at the cleaner was the ghost train. The first week she lived with us, she stood at the back step eating cereal from a mug and said, "Your town smells like river mud and dryer sheets," which somehow sounded less like criticism than simple scientific reporting. I wanted to dislike her. That would have made the rest of this easier. But Mara had the irritating habit of being kind in the exact moment kindness mattered. When she noticed I always took the end slice of meatloaf because it meant nobody would comment on how much I was eating, she started taking it first and splitting it with me. When she heard Caleb Parker, my friend since 3rd grade, call my after-school job ironing old lady pants, she smiled at him and said, "Lucky for you, some people enjoy useful skills." She brought home gas station moon pies because she'd seen me buy them twice. She watched people carefully, which can feel like love when you haven't yet learned the difference between being seen and being studied. Caleb belonged to the version of my life that had come before the remarriage. We'd played Little League together until I quit because I was better at standing in the outfield thinking about clouds than tracking a fly ball. Caleb stayed with baseball, got broad through the shoulders, and turned into the kind of boy adults praised for keeping it simple. He carried a state quarter in his pocket and rolled it across his knuckles while he talked. He was loyal, honestly loyal, the kind who'd show up with jumper cables or help you move a couch. But his flaw was a hard one. He believed there was a right shape for everything. Right way to stand, right way to joke, right way to be a guy, right future for people who didn't want trouble. If the world spilled outside those lines, he looked at the mess like it was deliberate. I was good at giving people what kept the day easy. That sounds noble when you say it fast. Slower, it looks more like disappearing. I was the easy son, the low-maintenance one, the one teachers described as pleasant. I got decent grades, washed dishes without being asked too often, said fine when adults asked how I was doing, and had a face people trusted because it did not broadcast much. Inside was different. Inside had static. Inside had questions that never lined up neatly enough to ask out loud. They mostly gathered around clothes, which felt ridiculous even to me. Not fashion. Not style. Fabric. Shape. What a sleeve changed. What a collar implied. Why a stiff button-down made my skin feel 2 sizes too small, while the soft drape of certain things I was not supposed to notice could make my whole rib cage loosen. At Harlan's, I would run my thumb over silk linings or the edge of satin ribbon and feel my thoughts go briefly quiet. I told myself it was texture. I told myself I liked craftsmanship. I told myself lots of true things that were not the whole truth. A few months before Mara came, I found an old photograph in the bottom drawer beneath the bobbins and chalk wheels. My mother was 19, maybe 20, standing on a stage in a tuxedo jacket, fishnet stockings, and tap shoes, one hand on her hip, grinning directly into the camera like she had just won an argument with the whole world. There was so much life in that grin, I almost didn't recognize her. When she walked in and saw it in my hand, she crossed the room faster than I'd ever seen her move at the shop. "That old thing," she said, smiling too quickly. Then she slid it from my fingers and tucked it into her apron pocket. I waited for the story. It didn't come. That was the first open drawer in the house that stayed open in my mind. The shift started quietly, the way seemed split, not with drama, just with too much pressure in one place. Mara joined the school theater program because, as she said, "If I'm going to be trapped here, I want better lighting." She started bringing home garment bags and costume sketches and complaints about the director, who pronounced the names of playwrights like he was apologizing. One Saturday at the cleaner, she was trying on a vintage dress that needed the waist taken in, and I was checking a pair of snag tights a dance teacher had brought by in a panic. I held them up to the window to find the run, and Mara looked over from behind the fitting curtain. She did not laugh. She did not make a face. She just watched me for a second too long and said, "You look at fabric like it is gossip." Then she pulled the curtain shut again. That night at dinner, Vic's brother was in town, and the television was on low in the living room while the adults talked over it. Some awards show flashed a singer on the screen wearing eyeliner and a pearl necklace. Vic's brother snorted into his iced tea and said, "Boys are getting decorative now." Caleb, who had come by to return a wrench and got trapped into staying for pot roast, let out the small obedient laugh boys use when they don't want to be noticed not laughing. I made the same sound. It came out of me automatically like a cough. Across the table, Mara looked at me once, no bigger than a pinprick of a glance, then went back to cutting her carrots into severe little squares. That should have been nothing. In families, in towns, in the little weather systems people create around themselves, it was almost less than nothing. But later, when the plates were rinsed and the peach cobbler burned a little on the edges and everyone moved downstairs, I stood in my room with algebra open and heard that soft drag against the floorboards. The pantyhose appeared beneath my door. Beige. Control top. Cheap pharmacy brand. Her voice came through the gap. Just try. The part that embarrasses me, even now, was not that I wanted to. It was how fast my mind built a courtroom out of 6 square feet of bedroom. It's a joke. It's a trap. It's kindness. It's cruelty. She thinks she knows something about you. She knows nothing. If you touch them, you're proving it. Proving what? Exactly. Nothing good happens after midnight. That one was my mother's voice. Another voice, quieter and far more dangerous because it sounded like me, said, "You've already imagined this. Don't pretend you haven't." I picked them up with 2 fingers. They were cool from the hallway, thin as breath. The pharmacy receipt brushed my wrist. I should tell her to stop. I should open the door and put them back in her hand. I should throw them in the trash. Instead, I listened until I heard her footsteps move away. Then I locked the door I never locked and sat on the edge of my bed with the pantyhose pooled in my lap like evidence from a case no one had yet named. What I remember most is not some grand revelation. It was how ordinary my body stayed while my thoughts sprinted in circles. 1 foot in. The nylon whispered over my ankle. Then my calf. Then the other. The fabric tightened as it rose, a steady, even pressure that made me aware of every inch of skin it touched, not in a dramatic way, just with a strange, factual clarity, like someone turning up the focus on a camera. When I stood, the waistband settled at my middle, and something in me went very still. The room did not transform. I did not become somebody else. The radiator kept clinking. A truck went past. My desk lamp buzzed. But inside my chest, where there had been static all year, there was a brief, clean line. I stared at my reflection in the dark window because I couldn't bring myself to use the mirror. I looked the same. Not the same. A ridiculous, ordinary, frightened 17-year-old in a faded school t-shirt and pantyhose under his jeans, alone in a bedroom above a town that had no use for nuance. I laughed once under my breath because of all the ways to lose your mind. This one involved pharmacy hosiery and a lock that barely worked. Then I sat back down, suddenly aware of the fact that I had no idea what happened next. There was a folded note tucked in the receipt loop. Just 2 words in Mara's slanted handwriting. Still you. That note did more damage than the dare. If she had mocked me, I might have hated her cleanly. If she had turned it into a joke, I might have thrown the whole thing away. But still you landed in the worst possible place. It offered comfort and authority at once. It said she saw me. It said she understood something I had not admitted even to myself. It also quietly assumed the right to name my experience before I could. The first consequence was lying, and lying is a habit that fits faster than people admit. Mara started leaving little offerings in my orbit, as if we were feeding a feral animal into trust. A soft scarf on the back porch railing. A thrifted cardigan accidentally mixed into my laundry basket. A costume catalog open to a page she pretended not to care about. She never pushed in daylight. Daylight was for sarcasm and cereal and arguing with the toaster. The pressure came in whispers, in late knocks, in the click of that silver lighter outside my door. "You don't have to be scared of cloth," she told me once through the wood. Another night. "You know what's stupid? Letting other people decide what a shape means." She could say things that felt brave when you were tired enough. I started helping with costumes for the school play under the excuse that theater needed strong backs to move flats and racks. That part was true. It also gave me access to a room full of garments that existed for transformation without pretending otherwise. Capes, gloves, old military jackets, beaded dresses, shawls smelling faintly of dust and hairspray. Mara worked there like she had been born backstage. I learned how to steam chiffon without burning it, how to reinforce a hem by hand, how to stand behind a curtain listening to an audience murmur and feel time stretch thin. In that room, The rules of the rest of town went blurry for a while. That should have been a harmless kind of refuge. For a while it was. Then boundaries started dissolving the way sugar does in hot tea, disappearing so thoroughly you notice only when the whole taste is changed. Mara did not just invite me into a room with clothes. She invited me into her fears with no warning and no doors. One night, she sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor while I was pinning a skirt and told me, flatly, that her mother had once not answered the phone for 3 days and she'd been sure she was dead. Another night, she said she hated the look on adults' faces when they told her she was so mature, because what they meant was that she made other people comfortable carrying less. Once, at 2 a.m, she knocked on my door just to sit on the floor outside it and breathe until the panic passed because, as she put it, your side of the house feels less haunted. Being needed is a dangerous drug when you have spent your life being easy. I was flattered. I was tired. I was confused in ways I could not separate. Did I like the clothes or the permission? Did I trust Mara? Or did I just trust the version of myself that appeared when she said I could exist without explanation? Was I learning something about myself? Or was I being written into one of her theories about the world? The answer, which took me years to phrase, was yes. Caleb noticed first that something about me had shifted. We were leaning against the outfield fence after school while a junior varsity game dragged on in the distance. He rolled his quarter across his knuckles and said, too casually, "You spend a lot of time with your sister now." Step. He shrugged. Whatever. The coin flashed in the late sun. He studied me in the way people do when they hope you'll save them the trouble of asking a real question. You don't come around as much. I've got stuff at the cleaner. And theater. He made a face at theater the way some people spit out medicine. Since when? Since they needed help. Keep it simple, man. He pushed off the fence. You always get weird when people start dragging you into their thing. It was the kind of sentence I could have ignored if it hadn't brushed against something already sore. Weird. Their thing. Keep it simple. Caleb was not cruel for sport. He was sincere. Sometimes sincerity leaves deeper marks than meanness because it doesn't think it's doing harm. The person who offered me something closer to freedom arrived in the form of Joe Navarro, costume volunteer, thrift store cashier, and local expert in looking like they had dressed in the dark and somehow improved on daylight. Joe was 23, with green eyeliner sharp enough to cut paper and a ring of keys that announced them before they turned any corner. They worked 2 jobs badly and 1 job beautifully. Beautifully, in this case, was making high school productions look like someone cared. Joe had a talent for touching a sleeve, a belt, a pair of gloves, and immediately knowing what story they wanted to tell. Their sympathetic quality was obvious. They noticed the lonely kid in the room and made space without fanfare. Their flaw took longer to see. Joe slipped away from consequences like water off wax, bills late, messages unanswered, promises made with total warmth and partial follow-through. Their phrase was boring as expensive, usually said while pinning something impossible into shape. One Saturday, I was helping them sort donation bins at the thrift store connected to the church outreach program. I picked up a pair of opaque black tights still in the package and froze just long enough for a person who knew how to watch to catch it. Joe did not smile. They did not tilt their head in that irritating way adults do when they think they're being gentle. They just took a price gun from my hand and said, "Clothes are tools, not confessions." Then, after a beat, people get weirdly dramatic about fabric. I laughed, but it snagged in my throat. That's so. That's so. They slapped a sticker on a lamp with 1 broken tassel. If a coat makes you stand straighter, wear the coat. If a pair of boots makes you feel like you can leave a bad conversation, wear the boots. The object is not the moral event. I wanted to ask 9 follow-up questions. Instead, I said, "You say things like you swallowed a fortune cookie and a sociology textbook at the same time." Joe grinned. And yet I'm right. They were right and also not enough. Because the object wasn't the only issue. The secret was. The secrecy had become its own room, and Mara had keys to it. My mother, meanwhile, loved me in the blundering, half-informed way parents often do when they sense pain but mistake its outline. She noticed I was quieter at dinner and started making grilled cheese with the crusts cut off the way she had when I was sick as a kid. She found me sitting in the laundry room one evening staring at the dryer turn and asked if school was being ugly. She told me I could drop one of my advanced classes if I was overwhelmed. Once she stood in my doorway holding folded towels and said, you don't have to perform being okay for us. It was a generous sentence. It was also wrong in one crucial way. I did not know who us included. The contradictions multiplied. At school, I kept my shoulders set the way they had always been set, answered to Eli, joked when jokes were required, and avoided locker rooms with a creativity that should have earned academic credit. At home, I moved through 2 different gravitational fields. In the kitchen, I was the dependable son who unloaded groceries. In Mara's room with the curtains drawn, I was the person she said got it. At theater, I was an extra pair of hands who sometimes lingered too long over costumes I was not technically there to wear. Alone in my room, I was every version at once, none of them sitting still long enough to be named. It wasn't dramatic most days. It was exhausting. Contradiction rarely announces itself with thunder. More often it is forgetting which lie belongs to which room. The first unexpected turn came disguised as concern. Mara had a notebook she kept in the side pocket of her backpack, black cover, corners softened from use, elastic band stretched loose. She wrote everywhere. At breakfast, on the bleachers, during red lights. She said writing was the only place nobody interrupts the sentence before I know what I mean. One afternoon at theater, she asked me to grab a safety pin from her bag while she was pinned under a rack fixing a torn cuff. The notebook slid halfway out when I reached in. A loose page fell with it. My name wasn't on it. It didn't need to be. There were lines about a boy who lived inside politeness like it was a rented house. A line about beige pharmacy pantyhose under a door. A line about pressure and permission and the violence of being told what kind of softness belonged to you. It was good writing. I hate how clearly I remember that. It was also mine in ways she had not earned. My stomach went cold first, then hot. She wriggled out from under the rack, still holding thread in her mouth, and took one look at my face. You read that. I handed the page back. You wrote about me. I wrote about what happened. To me. To us. She stood, brushing dust off her knees. You think this is only your story? That sentence is still one of the cleanest cuts anybody ever made on me. Not because she was fully wrong. She wasn't. The house, the dare, the secrecy, the late-night confessions, the shifting shape of our family. Those were shared weather. But the inside of my body was not a community project. What are you doing with it? I asked. She hesitated. That was answer enough. It's for the Regional Arts Scholarship submission, she said finally. And maybe the Lit magazine if I clean it up. I laughed because if I hadn't, I might have put my fist through the costume rack. You clean it up? Mara, it's my life. It's not a documentary. It's an essay. That's worse. She rolled her eyes in that way she had when she wanted me to feel unsophisticated. I'm not outing you. Outing me as what? Silence. Honest, stupid, devastating silence. She didn't know. Neither did I. But she had already built the frame and was annoyed I kept moving inside it. After that, every room in the house felt wired. Mara acted hurt, which somehow made me angrier. She left me alone for 3 days, then resumed our old shorthand as if a week were enough to turn trespass into misunderstanding. I answered less. She grew sharper. We began circling each other in the kitchen like badly trained dogs. Vic sensed something and retreated into extra garage projects. My mother increased the volume of her wrong song singing and pretended not to notice the silence between us had changed texture. Then the second turn came from Caleb, because in a town our size, secrets don't travel in straight lines. They float through group chats and side comments and the soft rot of people wanting to know something before it's theirs to know. He cornered me after school by the vending machines, quarter flashing between his fingers. People are talking, he said. That's all. No accusation yet. Just those 3 words, delivered like a weather report. My mouth dried out. About what? He looked away, which was somehow worse. About you and theater. About Mara writing weird stuff. What weird stuff? He flipped the quarter hard enough that it hit the tile and spun. I don't know, man. Stuff. You should probably get ahead of it. Get ahead of it. As if my life were a rumor to manage. As if clarity were available at the front desk, and I had simply forgotten to pick it up. I wanted to ask whether he believed the talk. I wanted to ask whether he cared. I wanted to ask why loyalty so often came with conditions printed in tiny type. Instead, I bent, picked up the quarter before it rolled under the vending machine, and pressed it back into his palm. Maybe stop repeating it, I said. His face changed then, hurt opening under the stiffness. Caleb loved me in his limited way. That was the problem. Limited love still expects gratitude. The breaking point arrived not with shouting, but with paper.
It was a Wednesday.
Rain all day, fine and mean, the kind that makes the whole town smell like wet cardboard. I came home from the cleaner with steam in my hair and found the kitchen brighter than usual because the overhead light was on, though it was still afternoon. My mother sat at the table with both hands flat on a copy of the school literary magazine. Not holding it.
Pinning it.
Vic stood at the sink, not washing the same mug he'd had in his hand for at least a minute. Mara was by the back door in her coat, silver lighter clicking open and shut so fast it sounded like an insect. Sit down, my mother said. No one ever wants good news in that tone. I saw the magazine before I sat. Mara's essay was open to a page marked with a neon sticky tab. No names. No exact address. But enough. Beige pharmacy pantyhose under a door. A boy built out of good manners. A family stitched from leftovers. My whole body had the sensation of missing one step in the dark and not yet landing. Is this about our house? My mother asked. Mara stared at the floorboards. Mom, is it? I looked at Mara. She looked at the lighter.
Click.
Shut.
Click.
My mother's voice thinned. Ela? That was the moment every lie I'd been dragging around lost its handles. I could not lift any of them anymore. I sat. The chair legs scraped tile with a sound like a zipper ripping. Yes, I said. No thunder. No broken glass. Just that one word. My mother inhaled once through her nose, slow and careful, as if oxygen itself had become a delicate negotiation. Did this happen?
Click.
The lighter stopped. I could have protected Mara. I could have minimized. I could have said it was a metaphor and let us all limp on. Instead, I felt the kitchen in pieces. The damp cuff of my jacket. The onion smell from the cutting board. Water ticking in the sink. Vic's mint tin of screws on the counter beside the mug. Mara's thumbnail bitten raw. Yes, I said again. But not like she wrote it. Mara lifted her head then. I didn't make it up. You made it yours. It affected me too. You don't get to publish me because it affected you. Shorter now. Smaller. More dangerous. I was trying to say something true. You were trying to be brave with somebody else's skin. That landed. I saw it land. Her face changed, but she did not cry. Mara almost never cried in front of witnesses. She went white first, then furious. My mother looked between us like she was trying to read subtitles only one of us could see. Can someone tell me what is happening? No one spoke. Vic set the mug down. We'll sort it, he said softly, because it was the only tool he had. Something in me snapped at the sound of it. Not loudly. Quietly. Like thread pulled past its limit. No, I said. No, we're not doing that. We're not putting this in the garage with the broken lamp until everybody forgets. The room went still. I had almost never raised my voice in that house. Not because I was noble, because I was scared of what would happen if I took up the full amount of space I occupied. I looked at my mother and made myself keep looking. I don't know exactly what to call any of this. I don't know if I like certain clothes because of how they feel or what they mean or what I'm allowed to feel in them. I don't know if that makes me different in some official way you can write down. I know she gave me something private and then acted like that made her my owner. I know I lied to you. I know I'm tired. Silence. Then, very small, my mother said, Why didn't you tell me? That question was worse than anger. Anger would have given me something to push against. This was just sorrow sitting at the table in my mother's face. Because I didn't have a sentence yet, I said. Mara made a sound like she wanted to interrupt and thought better of it. Vic stared at the screws in the tin as if they might arrange themselves into advice. Rain moved against the window in thin diagonal lines. Somebody's dog barked 3 houses over. My mother touched the magazine with 2 fingers, then pulled her hand back, like the paper burned. "And you," she said to Mara, voice low now, not dramatic, almost tired. "You wrote this without asking him." Mara's jaw tightened. I changed details. "That's not the point. I was trying to make sense of it." My mother's laugh was one sharp breath with no humor in it. Since when do we use people to make sense of ourselves? The strange thing about collapse is how uncinematic it is up close. No music. No perfect lines. My stepfather went outside and shut the back door too gently. Mara stood very still with the lighter in her fist until her knuckles lost color. My mother sat down harder than she meant to and took off her glasses and cleaned lenses that weren't dirty. I remained at the table because standing felt like theater, and I had no energy left for performance. After a while, Mara said, "I'm sorry," but she said it in the tone of someone placing a dish in the sink, unsure whether the action counted unless it clattered. I believed she was sorry. I also believed she still didn't fully understand what for. Nobody ate dinner. Rain turned to fog. At some point, my mother went upstairs. At some point, Mara left through the back door with her coat half on. At some point, I realized I had been staring at the same sentence in the magazine for 20 minutes and no longer knew what the words meant. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator motor kick on and off like a second heartbeat. The days after were not noble. I did not emerge from the wreckage full of insight and excellent boundaries. Mostly, I felt skinned. At school, people acted overly normal around me, which is its own kind of announcement. Caleb texted, "You okay?" I stared at it until the screen dimmed and never answered. Mara slept at a friend's house for 2 nights, then returned and moved through the hall with the tense politeness of a tenant in a building after a flood. My mother kept trying to start conversations at the wrong altitude, too high, too abstract. "You know we love you no matter what," she said once while unloading groceries, which was kind and also impossible to hear cleanly when I didn't know what was. Love no matter what can still feel like love waiting for a category. What helped first was not revelation. It was routine, with less lying inside it. I started taking long walks before school down to the river path, where the barges moved like exhausted apartment buildings. The cold air burned my throat in a useful way. I kept a small notebook in my coat pocket and wrote down physical facts when my thoughts started staging riots. Red sign bent near the trail. Smell of mud. Left heel rubbing. Crow on wire. Steam from sewer grate. It sounds trivial. It wasn't. Naming the world outside my head made my head slightly less crowded. Joe found me in the costume room on a Saturday sitting on an overturned milk crate with a box of gloves in my lap and the expression of a person who had misplaced his own skeleton. They did not ask whether the rumors were true. They just handed me a bottle of water and said, "When a room turns on you, go somewhere object still behave." Then they put me to work sorting hats by decade, which was a deeply unnecessary task and exactly the right one. Half an hour in, I said, "Mara wrote about me." Joe kept untangling a string of fake pearls. I assumed some version of that. I don't know if I'm angry because she was wrong or because she was partly right. That's a rotten flavor. They glanced over. You don't have to solve identity and betrayal in the same afternoon, you know. I laughed to spite myself. Convenient. It's actually inconvenient, but true. They set the pearls aside. For what it's worth, nobody gets to draft off your confusion like it's public power. I looked down at the gloves.
Kid leather. Lace.
Satin. Work gloves with the fingers gone at the tips. What if I still don't know what any of it means? Joe shrugged. Then it means you're still in the middle. Middle is a real place. People rush it because they think uncertainty is a character flaw. That sentence stayed with me. Middle is a real place. Not a waiting room. Not a failure. A place. My mother and I made our first honest progress in the laundry room, of all places. She found me there transferring shirts from washer to dryer, and instead of launching into reassurance, she asked, "Can I sit?" I nodded. She sat on the upside-down bucket we used for storing detergent and watched me shake out sleeves. After a while, she said, "I found the old photo in my sewing drawer because I hoped if I put it far enough down, I could pretend that version of me never asked for anything." I stopped with one wet shirt in my hands. She was looking at the dryer door, not me. I did costume work in community theater before I had you, she said. I wore whatever the role needed. Men's jackets, wigs, sequins, fishnets, all of it. I loved what clothes could do. Then I moved back here, and some people from church decided they had opinions about what that meant. I got tired. I packed that part of myself away and called it maturity. The shirt dripped onto my shoe. Why didn't you tell me? A tiny smile, bitter around the edges. Because parents are ridiculous. We think if we hide the parts of life that hurt us, our kids won't trip over them. Mostly we just leave them in drawers. There it was. The story behind the photograph. Not dramatic. Not enough to explain everything. Enough to change the light on a few things. She stood, crossed the room, and touched my arm carefully, like she was asking permission without turning it into a formal event. I am sorry, she said, for not making enough room in this house for questions before the crisis. And I'm sorry you felt you had to carry this alone. I swallowed hard. My throat hurt in that humiliating way it does before crying, though no tears came. I'm sorry I lied. I know. She squeezed once and let go. And I'd rather hear a messy truth than get protected by a neat lie. It wasn't a perfect repair. She still asked clumsy questions after that. She still treated my uncertainty like a fragile package she was terrified of dropping. But she listened more. That mattered. Accountability, when it finally came, was smaller and stranger than the speeches I had imagined in the shower. I apologized to Vic one evening in the garage while he sorted bolts by size. Not for who I was or wasn't, because I still didn't have that sentence. For letting his passivity become my hiding place. He looked at the bin in his hand for a long time and said, I thought giving space was kindness. Then he shook his head. Sometimes it's just me being scared to ask. That was the most honest thing I had heard from him in years. I apologized to Caleb in a parking lot outside the grocery store because that was where we accidentally ran into each other, and life rarely waits for scenic locations. You asked if I was okay, I said. I vanished. That wasn't fair. He shoved his hands into his hoodie pocket. I was a jerk. You were rigid. Same difference. He looked at me then, properly. I didn't know what to do with what people were saying. I didn't either. He rolled the quarter once across his knuckles and caught it. Callback from 100 afternoons. Are we okay? I told the truth. Not the old way. He nodded like something in him had expected that. We did not become enemies. We also did not go back. Some friendships are built for a version of you that eventually stops living there. The hardest conversation was with Mara because love and harm had gotten braided together, and I needed to separate them without pretending either one had been imaginary. We talked on the back porch in late spring, both of us wearing sweatshirts against a chill too mild to justify them. She had the silver lighter in her hand, but wasn't clicking it. Progress. She said, I was trying to tell the truth about how trapped you seemed. You were trying to tell a truth that made you important to it. She winced. Good. Not because I wanted to wound her, but because consequences have to land somewhere real or people keep mistaking insight for innocence. After a while she said, when I moved here, you were the only person in the house who looked like he was listening even when nobody was speaking. That was the sympathetic core of Mara. She had been lonely in a way that made her sharp. She had been carrying panic, divorce grief, and a constant need to be the first person in the room to name a thing, because naming felt like control. Her flaw was that she reached for other people's stories when her own hands were empty. Both were true. I did listen, I said. Too much sometimes. That part's on me. I should have told you sooner that I couldn't be your midnight emergency line and your secret and your subject. She looked down at the porch boards. I'm sorry. This time it sounded different. Less like a dish in a sink. More like someone setting down something heavy they had been insisting was light. I believe you, I said. But I still need the boundary. She nodded. Okay. Boundary is such an unglamorous word for such life-saving work. Mine looked like no more late-night talks through the door. No sharing clothes. No using me as editor or witness for any writing about the family. No treating every private question as a collaboration. It also looked like me taking responsibility for my own middle. I bought my own clothes sometimes after that. Ordinary pieces. Not dramatic. Soft sweaters. Fitted black jeans. Once, on a trip out of town with Joe to source costume donations, I bought a pair of tights with my own money and put them in a plain paper bag and did not die of shame in the parking lot. Small miracle. Human-sized miracle. I saw the school counselor for the last 2 months before graduation. She kept a bowl of peppermints no one ever took and a framed postcard that said there are many ways to make a self. I distrusted both immediately and then, to my annoyance, found her useful. She never tried to hurry me into a label. She asked better questions instead. When do you feel most like you are performing? What do you fear will happen if you stop? What experiences belong to you, and which belong to the pressure around them? I learned that confusion is not the same as brokenness. I learned that curiosity is safer when it is mine. I learned that honesty is sometimes just describing 1 inch more of reality than I used to. The summer after graduation, my mother handed me the old photograph from the sewing drawer. "You keep finding this anyway," she said. I tucked it into the inside pocket of my sketchbook. By then I had started drawing clothes seriously, not because I wanted to vanish into them, but because I wanted to understand what bodies ask of fabric, and what fabric asks back. Seams, darts, closures, drape. Architecture for motion. Language without speech. I enrolled in a design program 2 towns over, and kept working at the cleaner on weekends. Harlan told customers I had a real eye, which from him was practically poetry. Mara left for college in Chicago. We did not have the dramatic estrangement some people probably expected after the essay. We had something more adult and less satisfying. Distance. Care with edges. Birthday texts. The occasional family holiday where we were both kind and a little formal, like diplomats from neighboring countries with shared weather and disputed maps. Years later, she mailed me a copy of her first published essay collection. Inside the front cover she had written, "No more borrowing what isn't mine." I believed she meant it. I also noticed none of the essays were about me. As for me, I wish I could tell you I emerged with a clean sentence and a polished identity and a little ribbon on top. I didn't. What I got was truer and less marketable. I learned that identity can unfold in private before it is ever spoken. I learned that a body can feel relief before the mind has the vocabulary to defend it. I learned that trust is not the same thing as access. Somebody understanding one of your secrets does not give them ownership of your interior. I learned that families can love you and still leave you without the language you need, not out of malice, just inheritance. Then, if they are lucky and brave and willing to be embarrassed, they can learn new language with you. And yes, I returned in my mind, many times, to that first night. The pale loop of pantyhose under my door. The hallway bulb flickering. The receipt around one ankle. Mara's whisper, "Just try." For a long time I wanted to decide whether that moment had been gift or trespass, beginning or wound, invitation or theft. The truth was ruder than that. It was all of them, braided tight. She crossed a line. I crossed one too, into a part of myself I could no longer honestly pretend not to feel. The harm did not cancel the truth. The truth did not excuse the harm. Now, when I think about that boy in the bedroom with a cold floor under his feet and the radiator knocking like an old pipe trying to speak, I do not feel the urge to rescue him from what happened. I feel the urge to stand beside him and make the room less crowded. Tell him he is not ridiculous. Tell him curiosity is not a crime. Tell him secrecy can distort a mirror. Tell him not every person who recognizes your hunger deserves to feed it. Tell him middle is a real place. Tell him he will become someone who can hold complexity without calling it failure. I still work with clothes. Not only clothes, but enough that fabric remains one of the ways I understand people. I know now that almost everybody is trying to find a fit between what the world expects from their body and what their body can actually bear. Some of us just discover that more obviously than others. There are days I move through life with no more drama than a man buying coffee and answering emails. There are days I try on a garment in a fitting room and feel that old clean line of relief, and I no longer rush to put it on trial. I am kinder to myself than I was. Not always. Often enough to matter. My mother still sings the wrong lyrics. Vic still keeps screws in mint tins. Caleb, last I heard, coaches Little League and has 2 daughters who will probably complicate him in useful ways. Joe moved twice, left 1 job without notice, and sends me photos of spectacularly ugly jackets from thrift stores in other states. Mara and I are not what people mean when they say close. We're something quieter and more careful. Sometimes that is the grown form of love. So when I go back to that opening moment now, I understand why it held so much electricity. It wasn't just about the pantyhose. It was about the fact that somebody else reached into a question I hadn't yet touched in daylight and named it before I was ready. It was about how easy it is, when you are young and lonely and desperate to be seen, to mistake recognition for safety. It was about a house full of people with useful hands and incomplete language. It was about me learning badly at first that honesty has to belong to the person living it. There is no perfect ending to that kind of story. Mara cannot unwrite the essay. I cannot unknow the relief of that first quiet pressure at my waist, or the shame braided into it, or the weeks I let her become the keeper of a door that should have been mine to open. My mother cannot go back and leave that photograph somewhere easier to find. But peace, the earned kind, does not ask us to erase what shaped us. It asks us to stop handing it the steering wheel. So, I carry the old selves with me. The easy son. The boy in the laundry room watching the dryer turn. The one who laughed at the wrong joke because he wanted the table to stay calm. The one standing barefoot on cold pine boards with a pair of beige pantyhose in his trembling hands and no sentence yet. I carry him, and I do not let other people translate him without permission. That is not a perfect truth. It is simply mine, and after all these years, that is finally enough. Thank you for staying with me through all of this. If something here touched something in you, a memory, a question, a feeling you couldn't name before, then this story did exactly what it was meant to do. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.
Hello friends, I am the owner of Translano and I have made this video especially for you. So I hope you will support me. Now I will watch this video with you. Okay, so let's go.